You know how we're always digging for those games that just fly under the radar? Well, I've been doing some serious digging, and I gotta tell you, I found some absolute gold. Seriously, get ready because in this video, I'm about to drop 15 isometric games on you that are seriously underrated. Enough chit-chat, let's get to the good stuff. Okay, so we have to start with Batora Lost Haven. Maybe you've heard of it, or maybe not, considering how niche it is. This one blends action RPG mechanics with a little something extra. It's all about balancing, like literally balancing your physical and mental powers, which is pretty brilliant, honestly. You're constantly toggling between these two modes in combat, and it never stops feeling fresh. The story's this whole cosmic tale about saving planets, making morally gray decisions, and dealing with the consequences, like not just in a click dialogue options way, but actual gameplay repercussions. It's kind of wild. The whole thing has this 90s comic book sci-fi aesthetic. I don't know what it is, but something about neon-soaked alien worlds always hits different, doesn't it? Plus, the combat's fluid and fast-paced. It's almost puzzly in how you've got to figure out enemy weaknesses as you swap between powers. It's a little under the radar, though. I feel like it just didn't pop when it released, which feels unfair with how ridiculously ambitious and polished this is. If you're into decision-driven stories, this genuinely has a lot going for it. Up next is Tunic. Tunic might be one of the best love letters to classic Zelda games that no one saw coming. You've got this adorable fox protagonist, and the whole game just throws you into this strange, wonderfully cryptic world that's falling apart. No hand-holding here. You're kind of just left figuring stuff out piece by piece. Like, the game literally gives you an in-game instruction manual that you discover page by page. It's in this gibberish language you can't really read, and somehow that's just so perfect? Yeah, kind of. What's wild is how it tricks you. At first, it's all cozy exploration and charming visuals, then suddenly, Souls-like combat shows up. It's genuinely challenging, and something about the camera angles and how the world loops back on itself feels super intentional. Every time you find a shortcut or hidden secret, it's like the game's quietly winking at you, asking you to figure it out yourself. The visuals are sharp but soft, like kind of pastel but still grounded in a way. Honestly, Tunic isn't just a game you play, it's one you decode. It's brilliant, really, how all these layers unfold. Coming in next is Shadows Awakening. This one, it's different. Shadows Awakening is an isometric action RPG, but its whole gimmick is this dual realm mechanic. You're playing as this devourer demon, absorbing the souls of fallen warriors, and then switching between them like a roster of characters. The catch? The real world's one thing, but you've also got the Shadow Realm, everything so playfully tied to that mechanic. Solve a puzzle in one realm, bop an enemy in another, rinse, repeat. It's like the game's constantly asking you to think in two dimensions at once. The darker tone makes it stand out. It's all moody and oppressive, and I love that it's clearly leaning into its theme. The shadowy visuals totally match the feel of the story. Dialogues feel meaningful, with choices mattering quite a bit. This isn't a hack and slash where you mindlessly swing your weapon. It's more deliberate, more methodical. That pacing might not be for everybody, but there's something about how it blends slow world building with these moments of fast, frantic fights that's just so satisfying. Shadows Awakening feels like it's asking to be discovered, almost like a secret hiding in plain sight. Okay, get this. Tactical Breach Wizards. Just sit with that title for a second. It's basically SWAT teams with wizards. Tactical strategy meets magic-wielding operatives in tiny rooms that turn into absolute chaos. The whole thing feels like someone mashed XCOM into a roguelike blender and throws some wizardy stuff. And somehow it works. You're tossing spells, knocking enemies out of windows strategically. Because, you know, there's always room for flinging someone into the abyss in the name of tactics. The character builds are also cool. You've got spellcasters with different roles, so you've got to think things through. The magic system's weirdly grounded too, like a fire spell can set off explosions if you're not paying attention, and you can chain abilities for big brain plays. The vibe here is small scale but so tightly designed. It's like you're playing tactical chess, except the rook can teleport your enemies into a vortex of flames. So yeah, this game is worth checking out. Up next, we have King Arthur Legion 9. Alright, let's talk about King Arthur Legion 9. You know, this one is a bit different compared to how most Arthurian games works. It leans hard into this gritty, almost Roman-inspired take on Arthurian legend, and I didn't expect it to hit quite like it does. It's part tactical strategy, part RPG, and honestly, it lives somewhere between Total War and old-school Fire Emblem. Doesn't that sound like a weird mix already? But it definitely works. The squad building here surprised me. Each member of your legion has these backstories and tiny personality quirks that grow over time. It's personal, and not a lot of games nail that these days. The combat is turn-based, but not slow. You're constantly juggling these formation strategies and terrain advantages, and I don't know, it's kind of addicting. That being said, if you're the kind of person who loves this kind of games, then definitely give this one a shot. Coming in next is Desperados 3. Desperados 3 isn't even underrated. It's criminally overlooked. Seriously, how did this one not blow up? It's a tactical stealth game, but one that nails the Old West as a setting. You've got 5 characters in your squad, and each one has wildly different abilities. You're not just sneaking around, you're pulling off insane combos with their skills. Like, Isabel can straight up mind control enemies, McCoy's this creepy sharpshooter with gas grenades, and yeah, of course there's a gunslinger for some dual revolver action. The game's all about planning, pausing the action, setting up chain reactions, and watching things unfold like a perfectly executed heist. You might clear an area without ever firing a shot, or you might lure enemies into traps, or maybe you just go in loud. The freedom is there, obviously. Also, the level design? It's incredible, dense, layered, and full of ways to experiment. Every map feels like a puzzle box, and for a game like this to still be sitting in the shadows despite being this polished, yeah, that's a tragedy. It's one of the best in the genre, easily.
Transit.
Alright, so Gears Tactics. Let me just start by saying this isn't your typical Gears of War experience at all, but it still is if that makes any sense. You've got the brutal, in-your-face energy of Gears, only now it's packed into a fast-paced, turn-based strategy package. You'll be commanding squads, diving into cover, pulling off flanking maneuvers, and chainsawing locust enemies. You know, tactically. I'm serious, the chainsaw bayonets still show up, and that's just the kind of ridiculousness I live for. Here's the thing though, it's not slow like other turn-based strategies can get. You're making decisions quickly, and the action somehow translates into this surprisingly agile and aggressive gameplay loop. It's soaked in all the Gears vibes, the explosions, the gore, the over-the-top set pieces, but instead of mindlessly rushing in, you're plotting your moves. And it's not just grunts and big guns. You've got a story here that digs into Gears lore. If you care about the history of humanity versus Locust, this ties into that whole saga. It's honestly smoother than I expected. You don't even need to be a hardcore strategy fan. It's just a great way to experience Gears in an entirely different format. Next on the list is Darksiders Genesis. With this game, you're in for something completely flipped. I mean, the Darksiders series was always an action-adventure thing, right? Third-person perspective, larger-than-life battles, all that classic stuff. Then Genesis comes along, and surprise, it's now isometric. It's a little shocking at first, especially if you already know the series, but then it clicks. They took everything that makes Darksiders special, the dark mythological themes, the hack-and-slash combat, and just shifted the way you see it. I actually didn't realize how much I'd enjoy it until I was a few hours in. Here's the highlight. You're not stuck with just one horseman this time. You've got 2, War and Strife. They play wildly differently. One feels heavier, all about brute force, and the other's quicker with ranged attacks. Swapping between them mid-combat? A bold move, and honestly, it's super satisfying. Combat's smooth, chaotic, and packed with variety, but there's a bit more thinking involved with this one. There are puzzles, a ton of them actually, and exploring the isometric world feels natural and more layered than you'd expect. It's one of those games that's not exactly what fans expected, but it still nails the Darksiders vibe. Coming in next is Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light. Let's take it back to right before the Tomb Raider series got its big 2013 reboot. Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light might not get the fanfare of the newer trilogy, but it's one of those games that sneaks up on you because it's so different from what you'd expect. You're still crawling through temples, dodging traps, and shooting bad guys, but this time it's in an isometric action-adventure style. It's wild how well the switch works. You've got tons of puzzles, platforming, and combat, but they're dialed in for co-op play. Yep, you and a friend, Lara and Totec, this ancient Mayan warrior, need to actually work together to clear challenges. It feels reminiscent of an arcade game, but with those classic Tomb Raider vibes baked in. You're spotting hidden paths, pulling off crazy acrobatic moves with Lara's grappling hook, and using Totek's spear as a makeshift stepladder. Solo mode's an option, but co-op is where it shines. Every level's got collectibles and time challenges that practically beg you to dig even deeper. It's faster paced, less about big narrative beats and more about how fun puzzle solving and frantic fights can be when you're working side by side. Definitely underrated in Lara's lineup. Up next, we have Ruiner. Ruiner's the kind of game that grabs you by the throat and doesn't let go. It's a top-down cyberpunk action game, but it's got this attitude that's impossible to ignore. Right from the jump, it throws you into a neon-soaked dystopia, this chaotic, oppressive world where everyone's either wielding a weapon or caught in some sleazy conspiracy. You're a masked protagonist, a guy on a rampage trying to rescue your kidnapped brother. Simple premise, right? The execution's anything but. The combat is relentless. You're dodging bullets, slashing with energy weapons, and juggling an arsenal of guns and gadgets mid-fight. It's all twitch reflexes and split-second decisions. There's this insane flow to it when you're chaining together dashes, slowing time, and landing critical hits. The art direction's pure eye candy in that gritty, cyber-style way. Everything glows with this red and black palette that feels aggressive but polished, and the soundtrack is, well, it's just loud and badass in all the right ways. It's definitely not a game that holds back. Ruiner throws you into its world and demands that you ride the chaos. If you're into intense combat where precision matters, this scratches that itch. Next on the list is Midnight Fight Express. This game feels like it exists to let you live out every action movie fight montage you've ever loved. It's this bonkers brawler with a top-down perspective, but it's all about close quarters combat. Think chairs, pipes, even random objects lying around. If you can grab it, you can use it to knock someone out. The whole thing plays like a love letter to those over-the-top one-sequence action fights you'd see in movies like The Raid. You're this mysterious, unnamed guy being dragged back into the criminal underworld to stop a big conspiracy before sunrise. The animations are what really sell it. Every punch, kick, and grab feels fluid, like there's true impact behind it. It's less about memorizing combos and more about improvising based on what's around you. There's a rhythm to the chaos, though. You chain moves together, counter at the right time, toss someone into a wall, grab another dude's bat. It's all very dynamic. The levels keep it interesting, too. Fights on moving trains, warehouses, nightclubs, it never gets stale. Midnight Fight Express is pure kinetic energy, and honestly, that's all you need. Up next, we have Wildcat Gun Machine. This one's like stepping into a bullet hell fever dream with a heavy dose of attitude. Wildcat Gun Machine doesn't hold back. It throws you straight into these cramped dungeons filled with enemies that want nothing more than to absolutely overwhelm you. It's not an RPG like the others, though. This one leans fully into the twin-stick shooter genre. You get this arsenal of outrageously over-the-top weapons, and it's not just about shooting, it's about constantly dodging, because those enemy projectiles will cover the entire screen in this chaotic symphony of neon death. What makes this game work is how tight everything feels. Your movement, your shooting, it's all super responsive, and you pretty much feel like you're riding the edge of survival the entire time. And the art style, kind of grotesque, but in a way you can't look away from, with these horrific biomechanical enemies and a bold, heavy-colored design. There's zero story hand-holding here, though. It's purely about the moment-to-moment gameplay, which might feel bare bones to some folks. Honestly, it doesn't even care if you're here for lore. Its main goal is to pump adrenaline into your veins while you're dodging and shooting, and it does that ridiculously well. Next on the list is Livelock. I can't get over how Livelock somehow didn't get the hype it deserved. This is like peak co-op isometric action. You're a freaking robot fighting off endless hordes of machines in a dystopian future, and it's got such tight gameplay. It's essentially a twin-stick shooter, but it's way more polished than most games in the genre. The combat feels weighty, like every weapon has real impact. Whether you're laser blasting a swarm or dropping giant mines for a strategic explosion, it feels so rewarding. It's not just the gameplay, though. The visuals are outstanding. You're looking at hyper-detailed levels smashed between ruined cities and cold machine-like environments, all designed with these cinematic flourishes. It's hauntingly beautiful, and each robot has a very distinct playstyle. You've got Hex, this damage-dealing savage, Vanguard who's all about tanking enemies, and Catalyst, who's more support-oriented. It's basically made for replaying because each character makes the fights feel like a completely new game. The whole premise, could humanity survive if reduced to intelligent machines? You just don't see that every day. Livelock is a forgotten heavyweight. We're just one game away from the final game, but before that, let's have Dust and Neon. First, let me just say, if you've ever wanted to grab a 6-shooter and live that perfect Wild West fantasy, but like in a sci-fi world, this game is your thing. It's isometric, but this one's a really tight action roguelite. You're outlaws versus robots, and it's oozing with that dusty, gritty cowboy aesthetic, but with lasers. And guess what? You've got to reload every individual bullet. Sounds like it'd be annoying maybe, but it's actually so satisfying. Each click feels like this high-stakes moment, especially when a horde of steampunkish robots is barreling down on you. The thing about Dust and Neon is, it's got this vibe, kind of like a modern spaghetti western, but it's not trying too hard to be edgy. It's just stylish. And man, the roguelite elements hit different here. Every run feels distinct. You're going out, looting, upgrading your guns, getting stronger, maybe dying, then hopping back in again with a grin on your face. It's way more addictive than it seems on paper. And the art style is also neat and clean, almost comic book-like, with sharp lines and muted colors that really lean into the vibe. It's just one of those games that clicks the second you pick it up. And finally, we have CyberCorp, because you know what? This thing totally has its claws in me right now. Like, legit, it's the game I'm playing all the time. So, here's the deal. This one's an isometric twin-stick shooter, but not like your average dime-a-dozen twin-stick shooter. It's set in this sleek cyberpunk world, and everything's drenched in bright neon, which I'm a sucker for. Feels like you're walking through a nightclub where everyone's a robot trying to end you. And the combat? It's super snappy. You're diving, dodging, unloading entire clips into enemies, then scrambling to reload while more of them pile in. It's chaotic in the best way. Now, let me just tell you, if you have a Steam Deck, this game runs smoothly on it. Personally, I haven't experienced any performance issues while playing on the deck. Plus, the controls are crisp. You can sit back and just melt time away with this one. Anyway, CyberCorp's also got some fun progression systems, a whole lot of gear and abilities to customize, so you're constantly tweaking your playstyle. It's all about building that perfect loadout. Honestly, the more I play, the more I'm hooked. It doesn't try too hard to revolutionize the genre, but everything it does feels polished and insanely fun. So there you have it, 15 isometric gems that seriously deserve way more love. If you find these recommendations helpful, make sure you hit that like button and definitely subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.